Win totals. My predictions are always right, of course. Your predictions, I'm sure, are right almost all the time. This is easy. Easy money, folks. Easy to nail these predictions. Absolutely. We will do it tonight. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Appreciate y'all being here on a Thursday night, 6 Eastern time. I don't know what the time is where you are. I just hope that it's a good time for you and you've had a good day. Let's enjoy the evening together and talk college football. So the lines are open. The link is posted in the description section. The link is also posted in the chat as well. So call about anything concerning college football. We're going to run down the news of the day, get to the win totals, and a few other things that I've come across here in the last few minutes. Amazon links in the description section, folks, of all the videos, including this one. And here's the deal with the Amazon link. Use the Amazon link, and that is your one way to financially contribute to the network here at the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. So it costs you nothing. You're taking Amazon's money and transferring that to the Voice of College Football. So when you shop on Amazon, please use the link that we provide down in the description section of all the videos, including this one here at the Voice of College Football. I'm excited just to talk some ball, just look at schedules, try to project win totals, do all those good things. But before we do all that, let's run down the news of the day, some of it disturbing, in fact. LSU freshman tailback Trey Holly, he turned himself into the Union Parish Sheriff's Office on Thursday and faces a charge of attempted second-degree murder. That's one of 3 felony charges he's facing tied to a shooting last week in Farmersville, Louisiana. Sheriff Dusty Gates of the Union Parish Sheriff's Office in Farmerville told ESPN in a phone interview Thursday that Holly turned himself in around noon. He's being held on a $512,000 bond. Holly's arrest Thursday is one of 3 arrests tied to a February 9th shooting. 2 people were shot. Holly is also facing charges of aggravated criminal damage to property and illegal use of a weapon. Suspended from the LSU football team, as you might imagine. Highly touted freshman, 11 carries this past season with a touchdown against Army, 110 yards. One of the most accomplished backs in Louisiana high school football. He set the state's all-time rushing record, 10,523 yards, scored 160 touchdowns in high school at Union Parish High School. He was the top 10 running back coming out of high school, number 172 overall, according to ESPN. So we have a second-degree murder charge on LSU freshman tailback Trey Holly. Also, as of Wednesday, another troubling story here concerning, this time, Clemson defensive tackle DeMonte Capehart, arrested and charged with unlawful possession of a firearm on university property this month. Online records in Pickens County detail that Capehart was arrested on February 6th. He was also charged with failure to exercise due care in a motor vehicle. Capehart's coming up on his 5th season with Clemson football. Has played in 34 games. Backup, made 30 career tackles. All right, folks are starting to call in. Probably want to talk football and not legalities, but did want to pass along the news of the day. Keep in mind that we've got an SEC channel. The link's in the description section. We've got a Big 12 channel link in the description section as well, so check them out. Also got a couple other shows tonight. We got our All In Clemson Tigers show. That's over, of course, on the Clemson channel. That's at 7 p.m. Eastern time with our buddies Jordan and Tiger Paw Craven. Then we've got the Big 12 show that's coming up on the Big 12 channel with Joey Foster That is at 8 p.m. Eastern time. There's a few other items I'd like to hit on tonight in addition to the win totals. We're going to go through the win totals for every Power 5 team. We'll take your requests in the chat in terms of what teams you want us to break down and look at the schedules and break down the win totals, because we're not going to do all 69 teams because we would be here for about 12 hours. I have already looked at the Big Ten win totals. Check out the video just posted yesterday. And also keep in mind, I'm not making predictions yet. I may have said that a few minutes ago erroneously, but we got to wait for spring practice. We got to wait for the transfer portal to kick in again, another cycle in the spring. I will make my over-under selections sometime in the summer. All right, let's get to it. We got the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. So I just want to kind of jump right into not win totals as much. I've got national championship odds, and I've got specific games odds if you want to talk about specific matchups.
Sure.
Okay, for the national championship, I'm going to
these from first.
FanDuel.
Okay.
So for the national championship odds, you've got Georgia at plus 300, Ohio State at plus 500, Texas at plus 700. Any concerns or issues with those three right off the top?
Texas and Georgia have returning starting quarterbacks. Ohio State will have an experienced quarterback, but not returning. I would tend to put Georgia at number 1 and Ohio State at number 2, but I've got no real issues with the top 3.
Okay, to continue with the list, Oregon is 4 at plus 850. Alabama is 5 at plus 1,200. And then there's a three-way tie for 6, which is LSU, Ole Miss, and Michigan at plus 1,500. Any issues with that list?
No issues with it. I am curious to know when a Big 12 team is going to pop up on this list.
We got a bit to go, Mark. We got a bit to go if you want to know the truth. Plus 2,000 is Florida State. Plus 2,500 is Notre Dame and Penn State. Any issues with those three?
Florida State, Penn State, Notre Dame. I think they're roughly in the same category. No issues.
I will stop this list once a Big 12 team shows up, by the way, Mark, okay?
Sure, I'm waiting. Yeah,
I'm waiting too. If somebody's looking at the list, I'm waiting. Plus 3,000 is a three-way tie with Missouri, Clemson, and Tennessee.
Missouri getting that much respect, as much as Tennessee and Clemson. Okay, that seems a little high, but that's fine. Returning starting quarterback, had a great season last year. Okay.
Plus 4,000 is Texas A&M and USC.
We have reached plus 4,000 territory, and Vegas still does not believe that the Big 12 champion, who will have a bye in the first round of the playoff, is the equal of Texas A&M with a new head coach coming off a 7-6 season, or USC coming off an 8-5 season. Wow.
Okay, and Mark, I have finally found not one, but two Big 12 teams that are tied at plus 6,000, Mark. Plus 6,000, you have Miami, Florida, Oklahoma, Kansas State, and Utah.
Kansas State and Utah. So an ACC team at 7-6 last year, Miami, new quarterback, good quarterback, but Cam Ward. And who was the other team besides the two Big 12 teams?
Oklahoma and Miami, Florida.
Oklahoma. Yeah. Playing in the SEC, considerably behind Texas based on their projections. I would tend to favor Oklahoma a little bit more, but a new starting quarterback for them. And he threw 3 interceptions, as I recall, against Arizona in the Alamo Bowl. So Jackson Arnold may have some growing pains. This goes to show you, I'm sorry, Big 12 fans. Big 12 fans, we love the Big 12. I love the competitive nature of the Big 12. I love the depth, and that basically anyone can beat anyone in the conference. But this is, again, this is not proof positive, but this is a strong indication that it is going to be so difficult for this conference to make any kind of impact on the national championship race.
Right. I know, Mark, you did your debate series last year. Big 12 YouTube is very passionate fan base. I love them. They're great people. But Mark, if you would like to debate a few of them, I'm sure they would debate you on whether any of them have a realistic chance of winning a national championship this year.
Well, I'm on record many times as saying once the announcement was made that Oklahoma and Texas were moving to the SEC, that the Big 12 would not win a national championship for the next 10 years at least.
Well, we need some off-season content to provide, and I think that'd be some good off-season content.
We'll
because people
down.
Yeah, people like blood sports, Martin, and debate has basically become blood sports, civilized blood sports nowadays. So, you want to talk about actual games?
Yeah, let's size up the ball games.
Okay. First game, Florida State at Georgia Tech. Neutral. It's in Dublin, Ireland this year. Florida State is a 12.5-point favorite.
The two teams did not play last year. Florida State is losing a ton of personnel off an undefeated football team in the regular season. Georgia Tech, I give Brent Key a lot of credit for turning that team around to a certain extent. Let's also understand if Mario Cristobal had half a brain and executed a kneel down, that Georgia Tech would not have had the opportunity to win a bowl game to get to 7-6. They would have been a 5-7 football team. So 12.5 points. But again, new quarterback, a lot of new personnel that has to work together for the first time for Florida State. But they should be a better team than less than 2 touchdowns against Georgia Tech. They should be.
Okay, that is also the exact same line as Clemson at Georgia. Georgia 12.5.
Wow. That speaks volumes. Clemson I'm trying to think when they would have been an underdog last year. They were at home against Florida State. They might have been, I know that was within a field goal one way or the other. And other than that, I don't think Clemson was an underdog last year. And for them to be playing a neutral site game against Georgia and to have the same point spread disparity as Georgia Tech, a 5-6-7 win football team this year at best, does against Florida State, just shows how much respect there is for Georgia.
Oh, okay. And this line shocked me, Mark. I don't understand why this team's favored, but Texas A&M is 1.5-point favorites against Notre Dame.
Games at Texas A&M, I believe.
That is correct, but still, year 3 for Marcus Freeman versus year 1 of Mike Elko and all that talent leaving was a bit surprising.
Yeah, a lot of talent from that number 1 class, and also a new start. Well, Connor Weigman should be back and healthy and ready to go for Texas A&M, taking on Riley Leonard and Notre Dame. That's a bit of a surprise, but yeah, I would have thought that Notre Dame would have been somewhere in the 1 to 3 point favorite range on the road.
Okay. Texas is 2.5-point favorites against Michigan.
Games in the Big House. New starting quarterback for Michigan. That's a week 2 game, correct?
September 1st.
Oh, that's a week 1 game.
I don't know if that's week 2 or 1. It just says no. I think it's week 2 because of the way the calendar lays out this year, Mark.
Okay, week 2. Yeah, I believe Michigan takes on Fresno State, their first game. So they'll have 1 game under their belts as a slight favorite at home. I think that's a decent point spread. I would tend to still favor Michigan a little bit. I might take the points if they were playing tomorrow.
Okay. Georgia is a 3.5-point favorite against Alabama.
When's that game?
September 7th.
Okay. So we're a couple weeks into the season. Where are they playing?
Bama.
Georgia's a favorite at Bama. Yeah,
by more
Vegas
than a
loves
field
Georgia.
goal.
I'm sorry.
By more than a field goal.
Yeah.
When's the last time that's ever happened, by the way? Alabama's been an underdog by more than a field goal at Alabama. How far back would you think we'd have to go for that to occur?
I don't think that Alabama's been an underdog in a regular season game. Wow. For a long, long time. And they are at home. And it's, by more than a field goal. I don't have any serious issues with any of these point spreads at all. I think the one thing that tells us more than anything, again, is that the disparity, according to Vegas, between Clemson, and Georgia is the same as it is between Georgia Tech and Florida State.
Georgia seems to be Vegas's darling this year.
Oh, yes.
Now, this one might surprise you, Mark. Oregon is a 1.5-point favorite at home against Ohio State.
I think I did hear that the other day, and I was a bit surprised because so much is being put on Ohio State, and even from Vegas, although Oregon was the next tier right under Ohio State, I think they were just below them in their national championship odds. And Austin is a difficult place to play, which means Ohio State would be slightly higher than that favorite at home. But they really like Oregon as well.
Great. I see there's an LSU fan in chat, so I'll mention an LSU game. LSU is 6-point favorites against Southern Cal in a neutral site game in Nevada.
So before you give me the next one, let me guess the point spreads going forward. So we got that game's in Vegas, LSU and USC. And LSU was certainly a stronger team, a more consistent team, just a flat out better team. USC did not, well, they had that early season win against Arizona in triple overtime. But other than that, they just did not stack up well against anybody that was decent until the bowl game. No Jaden Daniels. They lose all their receiving core as well. But Garrett Nussmeier, I think, is going to be a good quarterback. And I think USC is banking quite a bit on Miller Moss just based on a big Holiday Bowl against Louisville. I do think that that's a little strong on the point spread at 6.5.
Okay, Mark. Next game is a rematch in the national championship game, Michigan at Washington.
Okay. Well, of course, you would think that this point spread is going to be factored and impacted greatly by Michigan's game against Texas. But as it stands right now, they're playing at Michigan, correct? No, they're playing in Seattle.
It's at Washington.
It's at Washington. Michigan is a 6.5-point favorite.
Michigan is an 11.5-point favorite.
Okay. Yeah, well, this Washington team, I went through the win totals for the Big Ten teams, and UCLA was the team that I said, hey, this is the wild card team. And then once I got to Washington, I thought, well, maybe Washington's even more of a wild card team. UCLA may just be a not really good team, where Washington could still be a pretty good team, or they could have one of those significant dropbacks. They're just a different team. Not that they don't have anybody back, but they don't have too many significant players back. But to be at home as an 11.5-point underdog, I don't know who they've got in front of Michigan, but let's say Michigan loses by a touchdown against Texas. They don't get embarrassed, but they get outplayed. They lose by a touchdown or one score against Texas. And let's say Washington performs reasonably well in their first game against whomever. I would tend to scarf up those points with Michigan traveling all the way across the country.
Washington plays at Rutgers the week before. They have all cakewalk before that game.
But that's not their first game of the season. That's their Big Ten opener, playing Rutgers. Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to group. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, if they take care of Rutgers and they look fairly impressive, although these teams change from week to week, so you can't just ride on what these teams looked like the previous week. But man, Washington as a double-digit underdog at home is tough to pass.
Okay, I'm going to group these next two games because they're very similar. Georgia at Texas and Georgia at Ole Miss.
Georgia, Texas is going to be a 6.5-point favorite, and Georgia at Ole Miss, they are going to be an 8.5-point favorite.
You really shooting high in both of them. Georgia 1.5-point favorite against Texas. Georgia 3.5-point favorite at Ole Miss. So they're the exact same point favorite against Ole Miss as they are against Alabama, Mark.
Yeah, they are. Well, this is a different Bama program. We almost have to wipe the slate clean and say, okay, what is Bama now under Kalen DeBoer? Because we can't rest on this is Nick Saban's program, and even though they've lost all these first round picks, there's still this Nick Saban factor because hey, for the first time in forever, that's for the first time for a lot of you who've been watching college football for 15 or 16, 17 years, this is a whole new world. So yeah, I guess I'm really misfire. I usually can, but I guess that's during the flow of the season. I can usually almost consistently get within a half point to a point on almost every game. But during the off season, obviously I've lost that skill. Doesn't convert.
We got two more games, Mark. Two more. Alabama at LSU.
And the other thing I'll say about that is that unless I'm missing something here, unless Georgia has an extremely difficult game leading into either one of those two games, I think they're weighing the road home situation way too heavily. If Georgia's that good, I got to think that if you think Georgia's the best team in the country and they go to Texas and it's only a 1.5-point play, then you just anything under 3 points for me, you don't even take into consideration much.
Before the Ole Miss game is the Texas game.
Oh, they're playing those back to back.
Yeah, on the road too.
Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe that's where Georgia's going to slip up this year. All right. Our next game is who?
Bama versus LSU.
Bama's a 4-point favorite. Wait a minute.
LSU.
Where are they playing?
LSU.
Okay. I thought they were playing at Bama. Bama at LSU. I'll say it's a pick 'em.
LSU's 2.5-point favorites.
Okay.
And Mark, the final game is the game between Michigan and Ohio State. The game is in Columbus this year.
Yes. Well, this is all for fun, of course, because there's 11 games to be played before that is going to greatly impact where we stand at that point. And I think most of college football nation would think Ohio State's going to be 11-0 or 10-1, and Michigan may be more in the 8-3 or 9-2 range. Most people think that. So I would say Ohio State is a 6-point favorite.
7.
Okay. Do you have a problem with any of those or are surprised by any of those lines?
Notre Dame, Texas A&M was the most surprising one to me.
Okay.
I feel like if Notre Dame loses to Texas A&M, I think the Marcus Freeman hot seat should at least happen because this is year 3 for him. And compared to what he was projected to be versus what he is, so if he was to lose to a first-year head coach and Mike Elko with all the talent out the door, that dichotomy seems a little off to me. Now, I know with a 12-team playoff, they can easily rebound and make the playoff, and nobody will care about that week 1 game. But for me, this is as close to an early must-win game for Notre Dame as they've had in a long time.
Yeah, when you're taking on a first-year head coach and they're coming off a 7-6 season, Yeah, this is a game that Notre Dame needs to win. And also to this point, unless Marcus Freeman really kicks it into gear, they might as well have had Brian Kelly coach the last 2 years.
Right, which is odd to me because every Notre Dame fan trashes Brian Kelly. I don't understand it because they were a great football team. They couldn't win the big game, I understand that, but now they're not even making the big game, and yet they seem happier. To me, that makes no rational sense. Seriously.
Oh, I
they
agree
lost
with
to
you.
Louisville. You know Louisville's 2-2 all time against Notre Dame now?
I was not
Like,
aware of that.
Yeah, well, you can ask Will and D next time he's on there. Can you explain why they're 500 all time against Louisville?
The last time they played Louisville was at home with Ian Book at quarterback, and they won an ugly, like 12-7 game. And I
Well,
think
last year
that
they
was
played
Brian
Louisville and
Kelly.
they lost 33-20.
Well, sure. Yeah. I'm talking about the time before. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, they also play this year, so Louisville could get the edge on them if they win this year, which is just interesting to know. Mark, I found some Heisman odds. Do you want to go over some brief Heisman odds?
Yeah. Let's hear the Heisman odds.
Tied for first is Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck at plus 750.
Okay.
Plus 1,000 is Dylan Gabriel and Will Howard. Plus 1,200 is Jalen Milroe. Plus 1,500 is Nico, the Tennessee quarterback, who I have no idea how to pronounce his last name.
I don't either right this second. That is way too high for him.
Okay, and 1,800 we got Garrett Nussmeier and Jackson Dart.
Garrett Nussmeier, Jackson Dart. Okay.
Plus 2,000 is Noah, the Arizona quarterback, Noah Fifit.
Yep.
Connor Wegman and Riley Leonard and Cam Ward.
And where once we get down to the bottom of the list there, what kind of odds are we looking at that point?
The bottom?
Yeah.
Plus 50,000.
Plus 50,000, which I believe is a $5,000 payout on a $100 bet, I believe.
So, I don't think it's going to happen, Mark.
Well, that's what I was looking for. I was looking, and that's the end of the list.
Right.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to figure out, okay, who is worth taking a flyer on, taking a shot on? And I just don't see Miami producing a Heisman winning trophy quarterback this year. So maybe Riley Leonard.
Well, Miller Moss is plus 5,000. If he plays like he did against Louisville, he should be in the Heisman conversation.
He's going to be playing in a lot of big games. He's got a lot of talent around him. He could put up some big numbers. And if USC, let's say, gets to a Big Ten championship game, yeah, that is a reasonable shot in the dark.
Mike's fourth favorite guy, Alex Orji, is at 6,500 to win the Heisman.
Okay, he's going to win the starting job at his own school first.
I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe our first defensive player is at plus 7,500 and Travis Hunter.
Now, Travis Hunter, that's an interesting dude right there just because of all that he does. And he's going to get to play on offense and produce numbers. His team's not going to be expected to do much, but in the Big 12, if they make a run to a Big 12 championship game and he pulls off some ridiculous plays, he was, to me, the most impressive player that I watched last year, in that I had never seen him play before. So I'm not saying he was the best player, but at times I thought he was the best player. And he made some jaw-dropping plays on both sides of the ball for me. I like that Travis Hunter play. He's at what, 8,000?
75.
7,500. Okay. I'm taking a shot with Travis Hunter.
You've got Luther Burden at plus 10,000.
Yeah.
Don't see it, but he's a solid player.
Oh, he's a good. Yeah. When I discard somebody like Luther Burden, it has nothing to do with him, but a Missouri wide receiver winning the Heisman. They're not winning the SEC championship or making some kind of strong run toward a legitimate national championship bid. And he would have to have ungodly numbers otherwise. And I just don't see the path for him.
I agree. I saw some Donovan Edwards love from Ralph Wolf. He's also at plus 10,000.
Okay. That I can get on board with too.
Yeah, I'm surprised he's higher than Quinshon Judkins at plus 12,000.
Yeah, well, they're assuming that Judkins is just not going to get the ball enough.
I guess.
Got a guy called Travion Henderson to share the ball with.
Yeah, he's also at plus 12,000, by the way, Travion Henderson. And my guy, my favorite football player as of this moment, Brock Vandergrift's at plus 12,000 as well.
Yeah, so I'm with Mike, and I think that the long shots that I like are Edwards and Hunter. Those are my guys.
Yeah, outside of that, everybody else seems pretty unrealistic. Also, for any Michigan fans that are curious, Kyle McCord's plus 20,000 to win the Heisman.
They've got it down to Kyle McCord from Syracuse.
Oh, he's above half at plus 20,000 because plus 50,000 is the basement of this list.
Throw some names out there.
Haynes King.
Okay.
Garrett Green. Peyton Thorne, plus 25,000. Robbie Ashford at plus 30,000. Along with Raheem Sanders.
Only one of them's going to play. Okay.
Malik Murphy's also plus 25,000.
Oh, I can get on board with Malik Murphy way before the last few guys that you've named.
Yeah, I do too. Some of these names, Mark, in this list, I honestly have no idea who they are.
Like?
Byron Brown at plus 50,000.
Byron Brown. I'm not coming up with who that is off the top of my head. Why don't I know who that is? He must be a group of 5 player.
I tell you, they got all sorts of people on this list, Mark.
I'm telling you, Malik Murphy. Not that he's going to win the Heisman, but I think he's the best play out of the last 3 or 4 guys that you've named.
Caden McNamara is plus 25,000. If Iowa can do anything on offense.
Now that's, yeah, if voters are going to vote on a curve and say, wow, Iowa scored like 28 points a few times this year, and Cade McNamara threw 18 touchdown passes. Wow, that's unheard of there. So, but for pure statistics, that is a no shot.
Okay, Walker Howard is plus 20,000.
Okay.
Along with Thomas Castellanos. I believe he's the Boston College quarterback, right?
Yes.
I tell you, they got everybody. Nick Singleton.
Okay. Penn State. Byron Brown is the quarterback at USF.
Wouldn't that be something, Mark?
Yeah. So who in the world is throwing away money, even if it's only $10? He could throw for 50 touchdowns, and he's not getting at the Heisman Trophy.
Well, the other plus 50,000 guy is O'Marion Hampton. Have you heard
Okay.
of that name?
North Carolina running back.
I think
He's really
more
good. He had a really nice season last year. I think he's a better play than all these other guys at the bottom.
Okay, so Mark, that's all I kind of really wanted to go over with you today. Just fun talking some actual football and not realignment or rules or ESPN contracts and all that fun stuff.
You and me, the real. Thanks for the call, man.
No problem.
All right, breaking things down with the real MVP, Byram Brown. He is the quarterback at South Florida. He threw 26 touchdowns, 11 picks, 3,300 yards. And he's not winning the Heisman Trophy, but he did tear Syracuse to shreds with 3 touchdown passes in that 45-0 win. Next call, Dr. C's on the line. Dr. C, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going, Mark?
I'm good.
Great.
What's going on with you?
Oh, not much. Just, I was just listening to some college football stuff, and I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it. Was it yesterday or the day before Lombardi, the reporter goes on McAfee's show and says that Chip Kelly had interviewed for the Cincinnati job, and he didn't get it, which I found really surprising because it seemed like Chip Kelly really, really, obviously, we know he really, really wanted out, I guess. So I was wondering what's going on with UCLA. And then the other story that's kind of come alight, and Jed Fish is refuting it, was The Atlantic's Bruce Feldman stated that Jed Fish had interviewed for the UCLA job.
Well,
what do you think of that?
The first item. So you're talking about Chip Kelly this offseason interviewed for the head coaching job at Cincinnati, or are you talking about
I think
the
it was
offensive
last
coordinator
year.
job in the NFL?
No, he interviewed for the job at Cincinnati, and the guy they gave it to. Well, the other guy didn't.
Scott
didn't give it to
Satterfield.
him.
We're
Yeah,
talking about
Satterfield.
last offseason.
Yeah. So, and then even McAfee was like, "Are you sure about this?" He goes, unequivocally, he interviewed for that job, and he didn't get it. Satterfield got that job.
Well, here are my thoughts about that. First of all, there are people out there that will interview just to interview, or if there's a shred of a possibility that that job could turn out to be something that they didn't expect, and they get blown away with money, resources, just love what they hear. Why not interview for the job? That's what some people would tell you. So I understand that on the surface, UCLA is a better job than Cincinnati. He's already at UCLA. Why would he go to Cincinnati? And it's a step down. But so he either truly just didn't like it that much at UCLA, or again, he's just a guy that likes to go interview and find out and just hear what's being offered.
Interesting. Yeah, I was really surprised to hear that because, Cincinnati's a good job. I mean, don't get me wrong, but compared to UCLA, the recruiting that you can do at UCLA, the location, it just was really surprising to hear that.
Well,
He
it's
would
less
even interview.
surprising to hear it right this second than it would have been before a couple weeks ago. He just left UCLA's head coaching position to take an offensive coordinator position.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he must have been was he really that unhappy at UCLA, Mark? What?
I have thought that based on what we know about Chip Kelly's his disdain for recruiting and the way things have taken off in college football, that you not only have to recruit in a traditional sense, you've got to recruit your own players to stay. You've got to recruit the transfer portal. That he just wants to coach football, just wants to watch film, coach in practice, deliver a game plan, work with the quarterbacks, work with the players. He's a football dude, and I can respect that. So that was my whole take on him, just saying enough's enough. I don't want to be a head coach responsible for this kind of operation in college football, especially working at a disadvantage at UCLA. So I just want to coach football. The best way to do that at the highest level is to be an offensive coordinator in the NFL or at one of the best programs in college football.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm curious to see Chip Kelly's salary at UCLA versus what Scott Satterfield was making at Cincinnati. So according to this, in 2022, Chip Kelly was making $5.7 million at UCLA.
Wow.
And we'll see Scott Satterfield, his salary at Cincinnati is $3.75 million. So unless they were going to break the bank for Chip Kelly, he was going to take a $2 million pay cut to leave UCLA to go to Cincinnati.
Well, I guess it makes sense that what you were saying, they just interview to see, what I mean, I don't know. It seems odd. I don't know.
He's taking a huge pay cut to go to Ohio State, but he's going to be an offensive coordinator.
Yeah. So do you think his days of head coaching may be over and he'll just take OC jobs? Do you think that's...
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I don't see any other way out for him. For him to be a head coach, he's not... I don't believe he's increased his marketability as an NFL head coach. And I still think even that if he tears it up at Ohio State, he's going to have a difficult time being a head coach in the NFL. There are much better options, more younger options. NFL teams seem to be trending toward hiring younger and younger head coaches. And unless he truly just hated it at UCLA for whatever reason, I don't see him positioning himself to be a head coach. Yeah, I can't answer that because I don't know the man's motives and incentives, but it doesn't look like he wants to be a head coach.
It doesn't look like it, it was shocking the way that the time that he left, a couple of days after the second, what is it, National Signing Day?
Yeah, he left UCLA in a bad place.
Yeah. Yeah. That's unfortunate. What about the Jed Fish situation? Do you think there's any possibility that was true?
Yes.
Really?
Well, Jed Fish has a history at UCLA. I've heard him say good things about UCLA in the past. So it's a possibility, even though I think most of us would consider that to be a lesser job right now, but not by much. Maybe he likes that part of the country. Maybe he really enjoyed his time at UCLA. That's the indication I've gotten. Now, if I were Jed Fish or anyone who just received that great of a job at Washington, unless I just received a job that I couldn't pass up, whether that was from a football standpoint, a financial standpoint, or just a location standpoint. I love the job. I love the people there. I have connections there, and I really want to work there. I wouldn't want to have a reputation for bailing on a situation, a team. That is a really bad look, I think, ethically, to take a job and then be interviewing for another job 2 or 3 weeks later.
Yeah. Did Bill O'Brien do that, or do we know?
Well, Bill O'Brien's situation's a little bit different. Bill O'Brien is, number one, going to a higher elevation. He's elevating his career. The Boston College job was not open before. And again, it's a head coaching situation. It's obvious that Ryan Day in Ohio State even anticipated and understood why he would be leaving. He has a son who's receiving medical care in that area. There's just a lot of things from a life standpoint that add up to Bill O'Brien taking that job.
He's also from that area as well, born in
Yeah.
Massachusetts. So.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. His son is receiving some type of care at the medical center there.
Yeah, I saw. Did you see his son? He was on Hard Knocks. They would show him. He has a lot of medical issues. Very. So yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. But yeah, Jed Fish recruited Southern California really well when he was in Arizona.
I would like to know what happens to these contracts. So, in the Bill O'Brien situation, first of all, if he's making $2 million a year, that's roughly $40,000 a week. He was at Ohio State roughly 3 weeks. Did they cut him a check? Like, let's say he hadn't even received his first paycheck. Do they prorate a paycheck and pay him $120,000 for 3 weeks and he didn't really contribute? I'm not saying he didn't work hard, didn't come into work and start to fulfill his role, but he didn't contribute really to anything. It's going to have to all be done again, but then cut him a check for a prorated amount of his pay. And then he signed a contract. So what are the buyout stipulations of that contract? Did Boston College buy out that contract?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, those are the things that make you think, and it happens quite a bit. I've seen, if I recall correctly, they hire someone, and then who was it? Manny Diaz over at Temple.
Yeah,
he ditched Temple for Miami after accepting the head coaching job.
Unless somebody corrects us in the chat, I would like to know the first time this has come up, because that's the first one I remember. And that would have been in 2020. That would have been in 2019. And I don't remember that ever happening before that. Now, I remember Bill Belichick took the Jets job. So that happened at the NFL level, where he left the Patriots, took the Jets job, and then quit. But, or I'm sorry, he didn't leave the Patriots, left the Browns. But anyway, at the college level, this is happening 3 or 4 or 5 times every offseason, where a guy leaves a job a few days after the season's over, takes another job, is there for 3-4 weeks, a month, and then he's getting another job before he even coached one season at that job.
That had to be. Well,
Yeah,
imagine that being a
before.
Temple player.
I don't know.
Well, last thing with the Jed Fish, and I'll let you go. When he told the Arizona players that he was leaving, because I saw the news piece on the news, they said it took 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's horrible.
So yeah, what's the correct way of handling that? I think it's more than a 5-minute meeting. Like, what do you say? It's 5 minutes. Like, hey guys, I'm leaving. I'm packing my bags right now. I'm sorry you guys had to hear about it this way. I thank you so much. Goodbye. I mean, you can't even like shake the players' hands or, thank you for your hard work or I recruited you. Like, how does that work?
So these kind of situations, I'm sure, give the players even more justification, literally give them justification, and in their minds give them justification to leave and go play wherever they want and
Yeah.
think, you know what? We're not receiving any loyalty from these coaches. Therefore, why should we give them and these schools loyalty? Now, there's no easy way to do it. If there was complete loyalty, then that works both ways. So we shouldn't be so hard on these coaches in a sense because they would never leave their job then. If we want them to be completely loyal, then they would always stay at that job. And then if the schools would reciprocate that loyalty, they would never fire them. So a coach could go 2-10, 5 years in a row. Well, if they're loyal, then they would keep them as the head coach. So I tend not to be too hard on these coaches leaving these schools because they are looking out for themselves, their career, their family, and they have every right to leave. So it can't be done well. It's going to be done right after the season. And you are going to be leaving a group of players that at one point you texted them, you pursued them, you sat in their living room with their family, with their mom and dad, and you told them, I'm going to be your coach. We want you to come and do all these great things for us, and we're going to do all these great things for you, and I'm going to be there. And it could be 4 years later for that particular player. It could be a couple months after you were in their living room doing that, that you're saying, bye, I'm going to another job. So there's no easy or good way to do that or clean way to do that. But I, if nothing else, would give my players all the time they wanted. I'd be there for 2 hours, 5 hours, whatever it took, because I would say, okay, this isn't a great situation, but we are all wanting to achieve the best in our careers and making decisions that are best for ourselves, our career, our family. And for me, this is taking another job as the head football coach at another school. And I know that this is not a great deal for any of you. And I can understand you being upset, angry, feeling betrayed. Um, but again, there's no easy way to do this, and there's no way to do it that's not going to be at an inopportune time. So, and I would tell them all the things that I appreciate about them, and that I would hope that um, that they would continue to pursue a career, um, uh, whether that be in football and career in terms of their education, and do all the right things and look out for themselves and their situation. And then I would be there to answer whatever questions they wanted. And I'd stay there for as long as they were wanting to ask me questions, shake my hand, be mad at me, whatever it was, that I at least owed that to them since I recruited them and signed them to that school to come and play for me. And if that meant I
Absolutely.
missed a plane flight, that would be fine. I would have them reschedule it.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, you'd be doing it the right way, Mark. I mean, I was really surprised that, it showed it showed the players go in and it seemed like they went right back out. Like I'm not I'm I was wondering whether he was even there, whether
We
maybe he had someone else say,
we
no,
hear that Lincoln Riley did it in a similar way.
really.
Yeah, that it was just in and out, 5 or 10 minutes, out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's unfortunate. Um, but I get, because the player loses regardless. They're kind of like for their hard work or whatnot. We got you to this place. And I remember back in the day, this was when Chip Kelly was at Cincinnati, and he was telling the players that he was leaving. They got furious and were calling him names, and they were really mad. This was when would this have been? Like 2010?
Wait a minute. When Chip Kelly was it? Oh,
I mean,
when
not
Brian Kelly was at Cincinnati. Yes.
Brian Kelly.
Yep.
Brian Kelly. Yeah. So, and he got pretty tense and heated. But I think times have changed, right? Because of the transfer portal, because of all these things. I think the players don't feel as loyal. Not
Yeah.
all, I mean, not saying all, but don't feel as big of a loyalty. It's more like, is this institution, you call it whatever it is, going to get me to the NFL?
And the players at that stage of their lives, they're emotional. They're young men. They're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. So they're more emotional than a 30 or 50-year-old should be. And so they also haven't lived life long enough to understand that this is part of business. This is part of life. Otherwise, if you just think about it reasonably, when would a coach ever leave a program? He's always going to have to sever relationships with, it's not like he can recruit a class and say, this is the last set of players I'm going to recruit, and I'm going to coach them until they're done. And then you get a whole brand new set of players and I'm going to leave. It just, the timing doesn't work to where you can make it a clean break. It's just impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, as college sports are, I think obviously, but imagine if you have a coach that's going 6-6 every year, but has 100% graduation rate, right? Isn't that the point of college sports? And not necessarily these NFL and NBA. Well, they really are NFL and NBA factories, right? That's what they're not
Yeah.
really about. Hey, let's
I
get 100% graduation rate. That's how your salary's paid or bonuses.
I have been meaning to sit down and put together all my thoughts on NIL and the transfer portal and either deliver a live stream or a video expressing at least, not that I believe that I have the cure all or the answers, but to make this a little bit more palatable. And I had this conversation with somebody the other day. Uh, I think first and foremost, the thought that a scholarship isn't worth, so these players, let's understand first and foremost, they are being paid already. They were being paid before NIL.
Mhm.
So a lot of people that are listening right this second were fully on board and wanted players to be paid. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but let's understand that they were being paid. They were being paid the price of a scholarship, whatever that is at that particular school, whether that's worth $20,000 a year or $50,000 a year, that was their salary. And so I'm sick of hearing that they weren't being paid. They were being compensated with a very valuable, and for anybody who's paid for, whether as a student or a parent has paid for a college education and knows how much money that is and how difficult that can be, then you know that it's worth a lot. And the response given to me by the person that I was talking to was, well, that scholarship is only worth as much as the player uses it. It's only as good as what it's being used for. Well, you could say that about anything. If I buy a $50,000 car and I push it off a cliff and it never amounts to anything and I only drove it 1 mile, well, it amounted to zero for me, but whose fault is that? That's my fault. These scholarships and these educations are worth a considerable amount, and if the player wastes it, that's their fault. They are being compensated. Now, I'm not saying they're being compensated enough, and I'm not saying that they're not being compensated enough, because this is the answer, Dr. C, that I would like to see uh, the brainiacs out there that know economics and know how much money college football is generating, this is what I want them to tell us. Let's say, take any school in the country that makes a lot of money playing college football, and they would have 105 scholarship players to pay. And let's say they're going to pay them $50,000 a year on average. That's a $5 million payroll, if I'm doing the math correctly. That's like a $5.2 million payroll. Does the money that's brought in by college football, does it justify that payroll? So you're looking at, if you would incorporate all of college football, the 70 teams, I think it's 69 to be exact, 69 teams in the Power Five, and you incorporated that as one corporation, and you had a $5 million payroll for every team, that would be, shoot, for 6 teams, it's $300 million. So that's a $3 billion payroll. That's almost a $4 billion payroll. Does the sport make that much money?
I'm not sure how much we're talking about for college football yearly. Man,
Yes,
I don't know.
that's how much money would have to be generated just to pay. Then that doesn't count salaries and the training table and the equipment and the facilities and all this other business. The concern that I have, among many concerns, is when these players get paid at some point, and I believe it's inevitably going to happen, is the money that's generated by college football and all the TV revenue and all the ticket prices and the merchandise and all that, is that going to be enough to pay them? Or is this going to be tax generated? The taxes of these these citizens fund these schools. Are they going to fund the football programs? And what about all the other athletic programs and the Title IX and all that other business? Are they going to be paid even though their sports don't generate any money?
Yeah. I just looked up something and said the Power Five conferences combined bring in a total of 3.3 billion.
Okay.
This and
Well, it
these are
sounds like
2002.
they are going to be able to pay uh, each player in the Power Five $50,000 a year. And I didn't even include their scholarship. So it
Mhm.
doesn't look like they're going to make that much money unless I'm missing
Yeah,
something.
no, yeah. No, that's an excellent point. Yeah.
I've never heard anybody break it down like that, and I'm no genius economically, that's for sure. But it's 105 player. Or are you going to run it like an NFL team and say, we only need 53 players. So we're going to eliminate all these scholarships going forward.
Yeah, and that's assuming that the college football is as profitable as it has been these last couple of years,
Yeah.
you know.
And why do we need 105 players on a football team to play less games than we do a 53-man NFL team? Why is that needed? If they're going to be paid, then we need to start eliminating jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's it. That's an excellent point. Yeah, I've never really thought about it because everyone had, all I hear is everyone just say, "Hey, we need to pay these players. We need to pay them more." And it's like, well, everyone assumes that college football is making a cajillion dollars from TV contracts, which it's a lot of money, but it's not. If you divide it up, it's not as much as people think.
No. And then I would think your next math problem would be, of course, Ohio State generates more than Indiana, and Utah generates more than Houston in the Big 12. And you have all these disparities all over the place. Well, do you then come to some kind of conclusion based on TV ratings and money at the gate that you're going to distribute the money unequally, which I have no problem with. And so maybe the players at Ohio State will make 70 or 80,000 a year, but the players at Indiana are going to make like 10 or 12,000 a year. And then do you pay the starting quarterback the same amount as the third string outside linebacker? Or how do you come up with a salary structure that's either fair, meaning equitable, or fair, meaning based on how valuable the players are? And who judges that?
How much money is a backup punter making? So yeah, you know what, Mark? I've never thought about it. I've never honestly thought about it. I've always thought, because we've heard those stories about, they obviously are, if they're working all day playing college football, you never think of, you know, how much can we actually pay them? Where it's some money for the player. And then, of course, the scholarship, we have to take that in consideration. But what would be some money so they can have some? Obviously, we were thinking about the days where, the players, they were having trouble even getting food, right? Because they could only eat during certain times and things like that. And Northwestern, wasn't it Northwestern that kind of started this in many ways?
Yeah,
I
they
mean, there
pushed
have been
for
talks about it, but it wasn't until
unionization.
Northwestern.
Yeah, they pushed for a union.
Yeah. But to actually get like the nuts and bolts, okay, how much is this really going to cost? I don't think anyone's really brought it up. Like I said, they all think it's this giant money pit that is, 12 guys are just reaping in all the benefits and, driving Bentleys and on yachts and stuff, which there might
Well, if
be
those
one
are
or two of those.
well, if those are coming from private sources, that's all well and good. That's fine. That's what NIL is supposed to
Mhm.
be. Although it's not being processed the way it's supposed to be as a true NIL agreement and reciprocation of name, image, and likeness. From what I can tell, it is in some cases. I've heard about this player driving this kind of car and doing their car ads or their iced tea ads or whatever, or posting on Instagram. So in that case, they are fulfilling their NIL agreement. But in other cases, I don't see where this is. And I'm never going to be on social media following a bunch of players to see what stupid posts they're putting up. So I'm sure some of this stuff goes on without my knowledge. That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Mark, I'm going to let you go, but hey, man, I really appreciate the call and all the insight that you give us.
Thanks, Dr. C. Appreciate you being here.
Of course. Have a great night. Bye.
I was looking at somebody who contributes here at the Voice of College Football, one of our guys from one of the main sites, whether it's 247 Sports. For some reason, I was looking at their profile on X and then looking at who they follow. There was a reason I was doing that, and for good reason. They were following a number of players and recruits and targets for the particular team that they cover. And I just thought, wow, if I had to look at my Twitter feed, which I already look at it, and sometimes, yes, I juxtapose X and Twitter. I will continue to do this for who knows how long. Sometimes I call it X because I'm trying to get going on the new terminology because it's a different company with a different name. But I think, man, if I was in a position where I had to follow, it's almost like recruiting, follow a bunch of 18-year-olds Twitter pages. Goodness gracious. But I guess it's no different than a lot of the people that I see on Twitter anyway, and the nonsense that they post. All right, folks. Next up, I did want to get to, before we get to the win totals, we have yet to get to the win totals. I came across this that I thought was rather interesting, and I didn't look at the list yet. But speaking of, and dare we bring up the word academics, but this was reported on College Football News. So this comes from, I believe, 4 different sources. So this is a ranking of the top football playing schools in the country, college rankings and top schools that play FBS football 2024. And again, we want to give credit to College Football News. Not surprising, Stanford's number 1, Cal's number 2, and they both go to the ACC this year. And there you see their rankings according to Forbes and U.S. News and World Report. So 2 publications. There are 2 contributing rankings there. So Stanford's number 1, Cal's 2, and Duke is number 3, tied with UCLA. That's impressive. Northwestern is at number 5. We see all the military academies lumped together. And that's just according to U.S. News and World Report at 6, 7, and 8. Rice is tied for 9th with Vanderbilt. So Vanderbilt, when you're going 2-10 again next year and 0-8 in the SEC, you can brag about this. Number 9 in the country in academic rankings. USC at 11, Michigan at 12. So that's impressive. 2 football powers at 11 and 12, probably the first 2 that really show up as super football powers. Yes, they are the first 2. Florida, Virginia, really good school. When we talk about realignment, and Virginia is brought up as being a Big Ten-like school. North Carolina, Notre Dame at 15 and 16. Texas, really good school there in the 17th position. Illinois, I did not realize was that strong of a school at 18. Washington also there. Georgia Tech, Wisconsin, Maryland, Rutgers, some more Big Ten academic prowess with those schools. More from the Big Ten and also the SEC with Purdue, a big engineering school, I believe. Texas A&M and Georgia, the University of Georgia. Ohio State's at 27. Boston College, Florida State tied for 28th. Michigan State, Minnesota, North Carolina State. Wake, I am a bit surprised, is not higher. UConn at number 34. So I guess they play FBS football. Yes, they're at UConn. They're an independent. Virginia Tech at 35. There we see Indiana, San Diego State. Now some lesser schools, meaning lesser football schools in the group of 5 joining the rankings. Miami's at 41. UMass, the Minutemen, that powerhouse of a football program. Buffalo's at 43. Auburn's at 44. Arizona State, Utah, USF. More from what used to be the Pac-12 and now the Big 12 with Arizona and Colorado. SMU going to the ACC at number 51 along with UCF. Mizzou, Tennessee, Pitt, Tulane. Oklahoma, Iowa's at 58. James Madison. We see Oregon State, Washington State, of course. They've got an odd situation with an agreement with the Mountain West and also playing their out-of-conference rivals, Oregon and Washington this year. Houston, Baylor, FIU, South Carolina, Iowa State. Penn State, I would have thought, would be higher. LSU at 69, Kansas at 70, TCU at 71. Temple, Arkansas, Colorado State, Fresno State. I'm seeing these for the first time as well. Alabama's at 76, tied with Nebraska, the one non-AAU member of the Big Ten. Oklahoma State, Kentucky, Texas Tech. Ole Miss, I thought was a better school. And again, when our guy Tony Altamore comes on here, he reminds us that all these are really good schools, especially in the Power 5. So there has to be somebody Anytime you do rankings, somebody has to be ranked at the bottom. That doesn't mean they're not good at what they do. Hawaii, FAU, Nevada, San Jose State, UAB, Tulsa, Charlotte, Wyoming, Mississippi State, ECU, North Texas, West Virginia, Ohio University, a big journalism school, at least it was years ago when I almost went there. Louisville, Utah State, UNLV, Ball State, UTSA. There is the mighty Golden Flashes of Kent State, Georgia State, Sam Houston, New Mexico, Central Michigan, Texas State. I believe we're done with all the Power 5 schools. And rounding out the 133, more from the MAC, the Sun Belt, Boise State's at 119. And again, the rest of the 133, Akron at 124. Kennesaw State, of course, has moved up to the FBS this year. And the dubious distinction at 133 is a tie between Coastal Carolina, Jacksonville State, and Troy. Just thought you might want to see that. That, of course, reported in College Football News. Let's take our next call. We got David Greenshield calling tonight. Look at this.
Let's do it. Mark, I'm looking at them right now, these win totals. I find them highly intriguing. I do want to say, just looking at it right off the top of the bat, there's a certain Big Ten team this year that lost their offensive line, their quarterback, their best running back, and they have a new head coach. Not to mention they have a tougher non-conference schedule, and they've got this program pegged at 9.5 wins.
And you're surprised by that? You think that's not achievable?
I think they're going 8-4, Mark. I think this is the beginning of the Rich Rod years all over again. I think their coach is, be there for probably 2-3 years. He's on borrowed time probably already. But yeah, 9.5, not happening. Not happening. I hate to be the one to break the news to your largest fan base, but actually I'm not sad about it at all. But yeah, they're going 8-4 this year. You can already tell the games are going to lose to. I mean, come on. This is easy money. Plus I get the hook anyway. So even if they somehow manage 9-3, I'm still winning here, Mark.
Easy money. Isn't that those are famous last words.
Easy money here,
Easy
Mark.
money.
Yes.
All right, let's look at this schedule. I don't see a guaranteed loss in the bunch myself.
They're losing to Texas. They're losing to Texas, Mark.
Okay.
That's just it. Chalk that up.
I'm not so sure about that.
That's a loss. That's a loss. Quinn Ewers is going to gut them like a fish.
Okay. I've got a lot of less confidence that happening than you do because Michigan is going to bring back a defense.
They'll have a good defense, but
Yes.
their offense is going to be hot garbage. I'm telling you that much right now, Mark. I mean, they lose their quarterback, they lose their offensive line, they lose their best running back, and they lose their best wide receiver. Those are all facts.
Yeah, they are facts. You could say the same thing about a lot of teams across the country that maintain a high level of play from year to year that suffer those kind of losses.
By the way, Texas also picked up that Alabama wide receiver. Could be big this year for them.
Who did they pick up?
They got Bond. Prentice? I believe they got Bond.
Oh, Isaiah Bond. Yes.
Yeah. Through the portal, as everybody purges Alabama's roster right now.
Yes. I'm waiting for the UCLA purge.
Do you think some people want a part of that UCLA roster, Mark?
You don't think so? UCLA?
Well, the Dorian Thompson Robinsons and maybe the Charbonnets of the world, those guys aren't there anymore, Mark.
No, but they were just as good practically last year as they were the year before. Defensively, they were better.
No, statistically, they had a very good defense this year. There could be some defense there that's worth maybe poaching. I was thinking more the offensive side of the ball.
Well, when I say the UCLA, I was meaning offense and defense.
Okay. But by the way, I was going to ask your one guy, but Tony was on there about talking about Chip Kelly era. Didn't he think though that with the Thompson Robinson and Charbonnet team that he had them heading the right direction?
Well, I did.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really good team. That team came within one pass completion of playing in the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have thought that, because he seemed like really, talking about, I guess he was, his concerns was more about the administration there and their investment in football and their willingness to move forward in the college landscape being the way it is. But I mean, it seemed like Kelly was kind of building up to a point to where he at least had them heading the right direction. That's where I was going with what I was
Well,
saying.
sure, he had the 3 lousy seasons, and
Yeah.
then he went 8-4 against a lousy schedule. One of those deals where he beat everyone he was supposed to beat, and he lost badly to just about anyone with a pulse that had a good team. But then they had the Dorian Thompson Robinson year that I just noted that they almost went to the Pac-12 championship game. They went 9-4. They blew the bowl game against Pitt. They had double-digit lead. Anyway, I thought that they were a top 15 team in the country that year, 2 years ago. And then last year, great defense, poor quarterback play, tried to play the freshman.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he certainly had a much better 3 seasons than he did at the outset. But he doesn't want to be a head coach. Now, UCLA, they almost seem like they are charmed or fortunate to be where they are in terms of location, in terms of the school and being connected to USC, that they have just been plucked up by the Big Ten without really compensating with any type of effort to be a football factor.
Yeah, I know that we were talking about like Chip Kelly's, offensive game planning and schemes the last time we talked because I was interested in that with him now being the Buckeyes offensive coordinator. My thing is I know college football is less regionalized than it has been in the past, Mark, but I thought him being a former Pac guy and kind of knowing the lay of the land and the landscape of college football and knowing that area and that region would be big for him, next year. With that program, I should say, with UCLA. I thought that would be a major thing. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, though. He didn't necessarily at Oregon have really, really high recruiting classes, as far as I remember. But I just thought that kind of what you're saying, that area, him knowing that conference as well as he did, I thought that would also play well out there.
When he came to UCLA, he had, from a ranking standpoint, the same roster quality as he did at Oregon, competing for national championships.
Yeah. Well, I think he also at Oregon caught a time when the Pac was maybe not the best, because that was kind of the end of the Carroll era when he kind of got on his little bit of a run there too. Although Stanford was pretty solid at the time. Those were the luck teams, I think he had to go up against, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
So I did have a couple of other over and under win totals here. By the way, number one, did you think that Washington dropping down to 7.5 was surprising, or what do you make of that?
Well, I thought we were going to look at this Michigan schedule.
Oh, please do. Yeah, well, like I said, I've already got a peg for 3 or 4 losses here, Mark. It's in the bag. Texas, loss. Washington could be very 50-50 because they got to go there. So there you go. There's 2 right off the rip, possibly.
Okay. Well, that's 2 that you see.
Okay. It's not easy going to go on the road at Washington. I mean, that's not a gimme. That's not a layup.
Okay. Here's how I see it. First of all, there's no one that they are losing to for sure. There are no certain losses on the schedule. 0.
All right. Let me ask you this. What would be the early line on Texas in that game? I bet Texas goes into that game as a favorite.
We got a call from DeReal MVP. He was reading off the lines as they stand right now. Of course, that's going to change throughout the summer and after the first game of the season. But right now, Texas is a 2.5-point favorite
Okay. Okay. I was going to say 3 or 4,
Yeah,
but okay.
that's less than convincing.
Well, Texas is now, for what it's worth, Texas is probably going to open up what, top 5 or 6 preseason, Mark?
Yeah. None
Okay.
of what you're telling me matters at all. Doesn't matter who's ranked where. Texas could be number 2 and Michigan could be number 17 and Michigan could beat them. We see it all the time.
Okay. Whole new offense. I'm just saying, breaking it in
And,
against the Texas team that I think is going to go in there and be able to move the ball.
and I'm
Now,
just saying that there's
go
not
ahead.
one game on this schedule that I can say Michigan is losing that game.
Oh, I know there's a game they're going to be losing, Mark.
I
We
don't
all,
see any of them, and I'm
yeah,
not going to see them on the next page either.
it's called late November, Mark. It's called late November, Mark.
Okay.
Check it out. Mark it down right
Now,
now.
the games they could lose in order: Ohio State. That's the most likely loss.
Chalk it up, Mark. That one's
I'm
over.
not chalking anything up.
They might as well not even make the trip to Columbus. Let's just be real here.
Well, maybe Ohio State doesn't want them to make the trip to Columbus the way things are going.
Give me a break. Do you want to compare rosters right now? It's not even close. It's not even close.
David, you've watched too much football for way too long to be assuming anything.
Ohio State's going to have the best secondary in the country, the best backfield in the country coming into this year. They're going to have maybe the best defense in the country. They got their entire defense coming back from a top 5 defense last year, Mark.
And you wanted to know the odds for the Texas game. The Ohio State game is a touchdown.
Okay.
And that's the same point spread as 2021 and 2022.
Fair enough. Now, maybe once, they come into that game and they're 5 and 6 playing for pride, that will motivate them to play a good game. And they'll have some motivation. Maybe this new coach will get them amped up to play. But their comeuppings are coming once they get to Columbus in late November, Mark. Let's keep it real here.
Their toughest games are at Ohio State, and then I would basically put Oregon and Texas in the same category because they get Texas early, meaning they're not going to have time to put that offense together. So they might be a more well-oiled machine when they play Oregon later in the season. And then it's USC or it's at Washington.
Yeah, they lose. Okay, they lose to Oregon. They're definitely getting 4 losses. I mean, chalk it up right there. Like I said, there's your 8 and 4 right there. Either way, the 9.5 is in the bag because they go 9 and 3, which they're definitely going 9 and 3. I still get paid here.
Yeah, I am not confident in picking this team one way or the other. I would tend to lean toward the under on the 9.5, thinking they're going to go 9 and 3, but I think that there will be better plays out there.
They brought back all the 5th and 6th round draft picks that are going to the NFL this year, Mark. So they put it all into this bag this season so that they could, cheat to get their title, which they obviously did. And, now that it's all gone, eventually the sanctions and the scholarship reduction and the vacated wins will soon follow here. Now it's time to go back to the Rich Rod years, go back to 8 and 4, which they probably will, and, be who they are used to being,
Well, you are right. That's who they've been, aside from these 2 peaks of 1997 and the last 3 years. It's
That's
been
right.
an 8 and 4, 9 and 3 program for the better part of 30 years.
Yeah. I know your largest fan base thinks they've been going undefeated for like 20 years in a row or something, I'm telling you what, though, this Washington 7.5 also surprises me, Mark. I think that's low. I just wanted
And
to
I'm sorry,
get
Dave,
your
before you
opinion.
get to that, you brought to mind something that
Yeah.
I pointed out when I posted these over-unders with the Big Ten video I posted, I think, yesterday. So even Michigan fans would have to admit, unless they just are delusional, that this is an impressive
Yeah,
number.
well,
since 2011, when you're looking at win totals, this is crazy. Nobody's keeping up with this in college football outside of Nick Saban. That Ohio State since 2011 has, in the regular season, posted 2 undefeated seasons, 2 10-2 seasons, and all the other seasons are 11-1.
Well, I mean, statistically, you looked it up, Mark. How many times would Ohio State have missed a 12-team playoff in like the last 20 years or so?
Not since 2004, except for the Fickle year.
Right. Twice in 20 years, that would be the only times they would have missed a 12-team playoff. So, there you go.
Yeah, it is the most consistently dominant football program in the country. And nobody can really, if anybody wants to argue that, please call me. Please, I am begging and pleading for you to call me.
Well, I mean, a lot of these people say that only national championships matter. You know what I mean? It's there's nothing to being consistently good, Mark. Now, to be fair, what I appreciate about your program, Mark, is up until '98. Remember, we really didn't have. They were decided by newspaper people national titles.
Yes.
Pre 1998. So, and you've kind of stated in the past, during that period of time that to a certain extent they're. Did you use the term overrated? I don't know, but at least within that poll era, they were very subjective to the voting public there. So, and you've gone down that road.
Championships are tainted. Yes, they're wildly tainted.
So, and you've talked about a number of disputed years too. So there's certainly years within the poll era where there's a lot of disputes too.
Oh, absolutely.
So.
Somebody wanted me to compare Penn State and Michigan since 1993, and when you look at the 2 national championship numbers, it's Michigan 2, it's Penn State nothing. But is that fair? No, it's not the Super Bowl. Penn State could have won a national championship in 1994 and deserved one and earned one just as much as Michigan did in 1997.
Well, that's the crazy thing. Paterno had 5 undefeated teams, but only 2 national titles, right, Mark?
Yes. And one of those, he lost a game.
That's right. The year that they beat Georgia, the Herschel Walker team. So, but I mean, to that Washington, did you think that Washington win total was a surprise at 7.5?
No, they've got a new coach, a new quarterback. They've lost their receivers. They've lost their offensive line.
They have a new coach, a new quarterback. They lost their offensive line. Sounds kind of familiar, Mark.
Yes. I would, at this point, have a little more faith, though, in Michigan than in Washington.
Well, we shall see. I mean, I think Washington's win total, I just thought that was a little bit low. I thought they maybe come in at like an 8.5 or something like that,
So here's Washington's schedule. So they should have 3 wins out of the gate. If they're losing to Washington State, then they've got issues. The beginning of their season, they could rip off 5 wins right out of the gate, with Northwestern coming to Seattle and then Rutgers before they get Michigan and Iowa. Let's say they split those 2 games. They're 6-1.
Mm-hmm.
Then they go to 7-1 after they play Indiana. And then let's say they lose 2 of the next 3 against USC, UCLA, and Penn State. That puts them at 8-3. And then they've got Oregon. They finish 8-4.
Yeah. Yeah, there's your cover, right? That's close, though. That's a little too tight. The 2, by the way, that I thought could go over this year. Did you already look at Sparty or Wisconsin's schedule?
No.
I mean, Sparty was at 5.5. I know they have a new coach, but I wonder how doable that schedule is to at least get to 6-6.
Let's see here. Well, they have a non-conference game against Boston College. So if they can go beat up on the Bill O'Briens, then they'll be 3-0 out of conference, or 2-1. look at the beginning of that Big Ten schedule. Ohio State, Oregon.
Yep.
Yikes.
Well, they got to make some hay. I mean, that at Maryland game could be interesting.
Yeah.
Although Maryland's one of those teams that plays well early and then they just fade.
Yeah, they fade and the schedule gets tougher.
Right. So I'd be interested to see. That might be a barometer game for them.
Absolutely.
Because if they get that one, their chances of getting to 6-6 or 7-5 go up, I think, exponentially, even with that tough part of the schedule that lies ahead.
Iowa will not be easy, followed
No.
by Michigan on the road.
Okay.
Their closing run is less than daunting against Indiana, Illinois, Purdue, and Rutgers. So they could win 2 of 4 there and defeat Maryland, go 3-6. Then they've got to sweep their non-conference, including winning at Boston College. So getting to a bowl game would be a big accomplishment.
Yeah, first-year coach. I mean, I just thought 5.5 was somewhat doable, but you're right. That middle part of that schedule, or once it gets kicked up after that non-conference, is going to be the brutal part for them. But like I said, if they get at Maryland, I think they got a shot at covering that and getting to 6-6.
Now, here's a good exercise for all of us.
Yes.
And for anybody that watches on a regular basis, they've only heard me say this about 78 times, but find the teams that are going to win or lose 3 or more than they did last season. Because last year in the Big Ten, out of the 14, guess how many had a plus minus change of at least 3?
Well, who was +3 or -3
from the year before?
Because the top 3 win totals for the top 3 teams stayed about the same,
Yeah.
right? So after that, I think Iowa got 3 more wins, if I'm not mistaken, right, Mark?
Yes.
They covered that. Did Wisconsin stay about the same?
Yes.
I thought so. Trying to see who there was a drop-off with. Maryland stay about the same too, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, the drop-off last year, and I saw this one coming, was Purdue.
Purdue.
Yeah, Purdue
4-4-8.
Yeah, Purdue was definitely the drop-off team. I saw that
2.
coming into the season.
That's 2. There were 5.
Okay.
My point being that
go ahead.
about a third of this conference is going to experience a dramatic win surge or decline. It's like clockwork every year. So if I came on here and started throwing around win totals that were at least 3 games different than last year, there'd be all sorts of people in the chat that would call me crazy, but that's what happens every year.
Well, the one team that, usually what you see this with, Mark, is a middle tier team that pops up and has a good year, maybe because of a hot quarterback that
Yeah.
ends up leaving.
Or a break in the schedule.
Yeah, or a break in this. That I told you I thought Tennessee was the drop-off team in the SEC going into last year. There was no way I thought they would repeat what they did in 22.
Sure, but they didn't drop off to that degree.
No, they didn't drop off. They dropped off a lot less than I thought. I mean, there was less of a drop-off than I thought there was, clearly, there. But, because I thought losing Hooker and their 2 receivers was going to be way too much.
There were 25 teams that hit that mark last season.
To the SEC, Mark, what's LSU's win total at this year?
Well,
I didn't have it in front of me.
We will see it here in just a second. No, that's right. Okay, the SEC. Give me 2 seconds. LSU is sitting at, I'll pop it up here, 9.5.
Okay. That's interesting because it's twofold. They lose their quarterback and they lose their best wide receiver. But I mean, they will be facing they get Alabama at home next year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And yeah, that one could be tricky. You said it's at 9.5.
Isn't it on the screen? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
9.5.
9.5. Okay, my bad. Yeah, I could see them coming in at like a 9-3. So that could be a just miss. That one's kind of close to me.
Okay. LSU. Give me a second. LSU's schedule is, so they've got a neutral site. This will be a fun one in Vegas against USC. Their other non-conference games are Nichols and probably layups. Let's see. Where are they? Nichols, South Alabama. Oh, they've got a game against UCLA. That's an interesting. LSU is playing two new Big Ten teams, USC and UCLA. Okay. So that's the out of conference. Out at South Carolina doesn't look too daunting. Ole Miss, Arkansas, Texas A&M. So that looks like a familiar SEC Western Division schedule, as does Bama. They still play Florida, Vandy.
Good Oklahoma.
So it's pretty much their usual schedule, except they don't have Auburn or Mississippi State. And in place of them, they're playing Oklahoma and I guess South Carolina or Vandy.
Yeah, and they don't have to play Texas. Don't have to play any type of Georgia crossover.
No, it's not an easy schedule, but it's full of a lot of capable teams, but it's nothing like what they've had to face in the past.
No, I totally agree. That's a close call though, because I was wondering, how difficult their schedule would be, especially losing some key guys, and then especially with what the new SEC is going to look like.
They need to beat USC.
Oh yeah.
And then after that, they should win all these other games. They should be 5-0 when they take on Ole Miss.
I really wonder what UCLA's season is going to look like in the post Caleb Williams era, by the way.
Yeah, USC.
Yeah, this could be interesting this year for Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised that they're that sold on Miller Moss to not be dipping into the transfer portal.
Yeah, I mean, if this is another 7-5 or something like that kind of season, Mark, I mean, the natives are going to start to get really restless there, I would think.
Yeah, you're looking at a possible 1-2 start.
Yep.
And even if we give them the win against Wisconsin, which it's not out of the question that Wisconsin could pull off a small upset.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to play Penn State at home in the Coliseum. They should win the rest of these games. But you got to think they'll have 2 losses at this point to somebody: Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin, LSU.
Oh, by the way, I mentioned that Wisconsin 6.5. You know who they've got in non-conference, don't you, Mark?
The Alabama Crimson Tide.
Wow. The Kalen DeBoer era starts by coming up north, Mark. They're finally doing it. The South is coming up north.
Yes, we finally figured out why Nick Saban retired. He didn't want to coach a game north of Kentucky.
He did not want to come back to the Midwest. Oh, wow. Yeah, because they played Wisconsin, I think, to start the 2015 season, but I thought that was in, Dallas or something?
Yeah, Houston, I think. One of those 2 places. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was at Jerry World. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting game, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, that's going to be fun.
Well, as always, it's a pleasure. Hey, by the way, did you hear that James Laurinaitis, new linebacker coach at Ohio State?
I saw that.
I find that interesting. Hoping he recruit really
I think
well.
that's why he came back to Ohio State. I don't think he came back just to be an analyst. That's for sure.
All right, my friend. Always a pleasure. Good show.
Thanks, David.
All right. Take care of yourself, my friend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We got Matthew on the line. Matthew, what's going on, sir?
Nothing much, Mark. So I did want to chime in on the Michigan Texas thing. Maybe help out David a little bit I'm a big returning production guy, and Michigan is going to be in the 120s of that, Texas top 25. Also, coaching wise, I think Steve Sarkisian at this point is a more seasoned and better coach than Sharon Moore. Quinn Ewers will be the far better quarterback in that game. I don't think that's a discussion. I do agree with you. Their defense is going to be very good, but do I think Alex Orji's going to score 3 touchdowns versus us? Because that's what I think at minimum you're going to have to score. I don't. So I don't think they're winning that game. I would bet on the under personally. I think they're 9-3, which I don't know why that's such a hateful thing to say. You're losing a lot off of probably, in my opinion, the third or fourth best team of the last 15 years. So I don't know why that's hateful to Michigan fans, but whatever. There were a couple over and unders I did see that struck me, and I don't know if what you thought about. Texas A&M at 8.5 seems wildly high for a first-year head coach in a terrible situation.
Yes, we'll check out their schedule. 8.5. Now the payout is plus 114 for the over and minus 142 for the under. So the thing with these win totals is Vegas is very much encouraging a play in one direction, and for Texas A&M, they are highly encouraging people to bite on the over because they get paid out much more money on the over. Now let's check out the schedule. I know they've got Notre Dame at home.
Yeah, and then obviously they have us to finish the season, which will be fun, will be interesting. But it just, I mean, I've seen coaches with more of a track record go into, I think, the same situation or a better situation and struggle way worse than, 9 wins would be crazy. If Elko gets 9 wins in the first year, he should be coach of the year, period. He's lost. He should be.
I'm not ready to say that, not knowing what other coaches,
if Steve Sarkisian went undefeated and won the national championship, I would still go Mike Elko with that roster. He was bringing in a whole new team in a terrible situation.
If there's another David Braun out there that takes Northwestern to go 8-5, then I'm on board with that.
So right there in their first 4, I think they're 3-1. I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
They're not beating Missouri. I don't care where that's played at. They're not beating Missouri. They'll beat Mississippi State, in my opinion. So what is that, 5-2 at this point? That's my opinion on that. I don't know if you have anything to comment on
that point. Well, see, I'm not so brash to just say that's a win, that's a loss, that's a win, that's a loss. We're sitting here in February.
No, I agree, but I'm just running like simulations basically in my head. If they played 100 times, Missouri'd win that game 75% of the time.
Because again, I'm going to bring this up one more time for people because I can say this over and over and over, but to execute it and figure out who these teams are is a whole other matter. When you've got 25 teams in the Power 5 out of 69 that have a win-loss increase or decrease of 3, and you go try to of at least 3, and then you go try to find those teams, then you look like an idiot, or you're just trying to make these crazy predictions if you go to each conference and try to find a third of the conference, more than a third of the conference, that's going to have an increase or decrease of that many wins.
That's fair. I mean,
where are those teams? If you see most people that throw out predictions, and the reason I started tracking this, because I started looking at these preseason magazines and I started just noticing that all they do is pretty much predict what happened last year. They just changed the records by like one game. And unless there's like an obvious situation like Colorado was easy to see, they're not going to go 1-11 again. But besides those kind of situations, Athlon, Street and Smiths, all these publications, I'm looking at them and they've got basically they're repeating the records from the year before and changing them by one game, maybe, except for like 3 teams that are obvious trends in one direction. And then I decided I'm going to start looking at every season and figure out, okay, 3 wins is significant. how much of a change is there from year to year? And it's like 25 teams a year.
Yeah. No, I mean, if Texas A&M went 5-7 last year, correct? Did they go 5-7 or 6-6?
7-5.
Oh, they went 7-5. Okay, yeah. So 3 wins. I mean, I don't know if you were betting,
Yeah.
but I would pick them to win 4 games more than I would pick them to win 10. I'm not going to pick them
Yes.
to win 10 games.
Yes.
Just based off their schedule, I think they could go 8-4. Like, I think that's personally reasonable. Like I said, I didn't know their schedule before making that point. And their first 4 games, other than Notre Dame, I mean, Florida is going to be, I don't even know. I think they might be the second or third worst team in the SEC next year, just based off their schedule as well. And then Billy Napier, I don't know what he's doing, but I mean, right now I see 5-2. I think they'll lose to Missouri and Notre Dame through this schedule.
Chat, take whatever conference you want, any conference, and select a third of those teams minimum. You should actually select one higher than that and choose a third of the teams, like in the Big Ten, 18 teams. Select 6 in the SEC, 16 teams. Take 6 and find 6 teams and put them in the chat that you believe are going to either win at least 3 more or lose at least 3 more next season, and see how difficult that is.
I'm going to look at the standings just because now I'm interested.
So, for example, everyone, last year in the Big Ten, it was 5 out of 14. Minnesota went from 8-4 to 5-7. Illinois went from 8-4 to 5-7. Purdue went from 8-4 to 4-8. Iowa went from 7-5 to 10-2. And who am I missing?
Are you counting regular season and their bowl game if they had one, or just regular season?
No, it's just we don't know who they're going to play in a bowl game. It's just a regular season exercise. Yes, just those 12 games. Oh, Northwestern 1-11 to 7-5. So Mike Fort says Kentucky could lose 3 more. LSU could lose 3 more. So Kentucky went 7-5 last year. Kentucky's going to go 4-8, according to Mike. And I'm not saying Mike's predicting this, but he's just throwing 2 teams out. LSU would have to go 6-6.
Yeah, I don't see that.
And you still have to find another 4 teams to do that. But it happens every year.
I was going to say we can keep going through this if you want, but Auburn too. Auburn, they went 6-6 last year. I think they can win 9 games.
Okay.
I could see that in Hugh Freeze's second year. That wouldn't surprise me. That guy is a genius offensively, and they honestly should have beat Georgia and Alabama last year. So
do you think Mizzou could go 7-5?
I'd have to see their schedule to make that statement, because they bring back their quarterback and their 2 best wide receivers. They bring back a lot on defense as well with a good recruiting class. Based off of those 4, no, that's 4-0 right there.
Yeah, so when you see Boston College on their schedule, you know that that's their toughest non-conference game. So they're going to go 4-0 out of conference. So that's and they got Vandy as well.
Well, and that helps too. I didn't even realize that, because on Texas A&M schedule, you don't see they have a bye before Texas A&M. That just emboldens me even more. They're going to beat Texas A&M.
Yeah, somebody would have to present to me some kind of metric to prove that buys mean something.
I think it matters to certain coaches. To Hugh Freeze, I'm on Auburn still. To Eli Drinkowitz, it may not mean something, but certain coaches, I think it means more. UMass, that's another freaking guarantee. They're already at 5, I think, almost guaranteed wins on their schedule right there.
Yeah, let's say they even trip up at Texas A&M. They're 5-1. Then at very worst, they go 5-3.
Yeah.
Even if they lose at home to Auburn, they're going to beat Arkansas.
They'll beat
again. We think, because I guess they could lose 2 more. They could lose to Oklahoma and somebody else and be 7-5.
Yeah, that's the absolute worst they could possibly, unless something like a lot of players get hurt or something. But I guess the worst I could see is 7-5. Just based off the schedule, I don't know what their over-under is. I think they're going 9-3.
Their over-under is
it's probably
9.5.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet that. They could easily. I think they'll win 9 to 10 games.
I would take the under,
I would too. I think they'll win 9.
but I'm not jumping to take it, but I would take it if I had to.
And then let's click on those Sooners, Mark, because they're at 7.5, and I know their
Okay.
fans. You have a guy on here, nice guy, respect him. I don't think it's a guy I spoke to when we do your shows, but he has his own channel. He posted a video. I tried to watch it, and then it just felt like trolling to me. He said why Oklahoma is set up better going to the SEC than Texas. And I think Oklahoma fans would even laugh at that because there's no chance you're replacing your quarterback, your
Yep.
offensive coordinator, your whole offensive line, and coming back with a god-awful defense, and you're going to be better than us. I would bet every single penny I make for the rest of my life, Oklahoma does not win more games than Texas next year. There's no chance.
You would bet every penny
I
that
make
you're
the
going
rest of
to
my
make
life.
the rest of your life. Well, I'm not saying you're wrong because I tend to believe that you're correct, but I certainly wouldn't make that bet myself. I wouldn't make that bet for Ohio State against Rutgers.
That's fair. I just
You
don't.
never know what could happen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if half our team dies and Austin gets
Yes.
taken over, I don't know. Maybe if that happens, then yeah. But unless Jackson Arnold comes in and he is Trevor Lawrence, it's not happening.
All right, Matthew. So they've got to win the first 3 games.
And they're at home. They should. Man, they start out four games in a row at home.
Yes. So Tennessee, that's going to be a good barometer
be a good
right
game.
out of the gate, or not out of the gate, but knowing Oklahoma and how they've struggled against, let's see, last season it was BYU, UCF. I wouldn't necessarily call this Tulane game a complete check mark.
Is Michael Pratt back, or did he declare for the draft?
That is a great question because that's the same question that was running through my mind when I said that.
Yeah, I know it was a big deal, and then it went there. I haven't heard anything about it. I think he might have declared. I think I may have seen him on a draft, like mock draft thing, but I don't know.
I see 3 days ago, 2024 NFL Draft Quarterback Deep Dive, Michael Pratt.
Okay, so he's
So
gone.
it looks as though that's the case.
Yeah, that makes a pretty big difference because I don't even know who their quarterback is at that point. But yeah, I mean they lost to Kansas as well with without Jalen Daniels. So, and Kansas was still good last year without Jalen Daniels, but their Jalen Daniels is a whole different thing than Jason Bean. But I think that's a 50-50 game versus Tennessee. I think Tennessee is one of those teams. If Nico can come in and play 80% of what Hendon Hooker was 2 years ago, they can be a really, really good team. But I don't know if he can do that. We'll see.
So would we agree that most likely they're 4-1 going to the
into the
Cotton Bowl?
bye? I would agree with that.
Most likely. 4-2.
South Carolina, I think they win that game. At Ole Miss, I don't think they win that.
So they're at 5-3, right?
Yeah. And I didn't even know Maine had a football team, but they play Maine.
Heck yeah, the Black Bears. So they've got Maine at 6-3.
Wow, that's a rough 3-game stretch in the season.
Yeah. Wow, it really is. Missouri on the road, Alabama at home, at LSU. Ooh.
So what did we have them at, Mark?
They were at 6-3 before those 3.
So at best, they win 2 of those games, in my opinion. They're not winning all 3.
Yeah,
There's no chance.
Yes, at the very best.
So they're 8-4.
The probability is that they lose 2 of those 3.
Yeah, I was being kind. That's why I'm saying like 7.5 is perfect to me. I mean, Vegas knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're going to win 7-8 games.
Yeah.
I was looking through the schedule. I hadn't seen the whole thing yet, and I knew they played Alabama, but I didn't know they were getting those 3 to end the season. That makes a big difference.
Well, Matthew, regardless of where you want to go next, can we cut in with Texas?
Yo, of course we can.
So
I've already predicted this in advance. I'm going to update it probably every month, just to get because things change so quickly. Like something could happen and that could flip. So we'll see. But we'll go through it. But I know what the record is right now that I predicted.
Yeah, and just of course let me know the most likely pitfalls.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're not losing to Colorado State. I'm not saying Michigan's a win. Do I think we're going to win that game? Yes. We're favored. I think we should be favored. I think we have the better team. But Michigan is definitely, they're going to be a top 15 15 team next year. They can beat us, but I do think we win that game. I mean, the next three, we'll win those games. So we're 5-0 going into the bye. And then Oklahoma, obviously, everyone knows that's usually a toss-up game. I believe his name's Jason, when we were talking about the Cotton Bowl last year, mentioned first-year starters do very bad in that game. Like, they'd only won 3 or 4 of the last 20. So Jackson Arnold going into that game, it's his first start.
Yep.
I don't think they're winning that game. This is a loss. We're not beating Georgia. I don't care if it's played in the Walmart parking lot. I don't care if it's played on the moon. I don't care if it's played on Mars. We're not beating them. So
you were conceding that game at home?
Yes, because I think Georgia next year is going to be I don't know, a chainsaw mixed with a barbed wire baseball bat and kill everyone.
You're giving them the national championship.
I think the national championship will be one of those two teams on that field next year, Ohio State. I would bet those 3 are the field. I would take those 3.
Okay. All right. So that's 1 loss against however many wins at that point.
Yeah, at Vanderbilt, we'll win that game. I'm going to try to go to that game because that's the closest Texas really gets to here from Ohio. And then Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, A&M. We're going to lose one of those games, in my opinion. I don't know which one. I went out on a limb. I know it's at home. I think Kentucky's going to be pretty good next year. I think Brock Vandagriff is going to show people that he's a pretty good quarterback. All the other transfers that they got. I think Mark Stoops is an underrated coach in the SEC. I did my SEC coach rankings. I think I had him 7th. So I think we're going to lose to them. If not them, I can't believe I'm going to say this. A&M would be the second out of those 4 would be second to me that we could lose to. We're not losing to I'm telling you this right now. Mark, you remember it was my first year on this channel when Arkansas skull dragged Texas.
Sure.
That's one of those games on the schedule. Texas is going to destroy Arkansas and Fayetteville, destroy them. Sam Pittman will be fired by that point, and they are going to remember that Arkansas ran for 300 yards in Steve Sarkisian's first big game. We're going to kill them. There's 2 guarantees to me on the schedule, and Arkansas is one of them in real games. I'm not going to count playing UL Monroe. But Arkansas to me will win that game. Florida, I mean, that's crazy too when you look at this. We play Florida and Arkansas back to back. They will probably have interim head coaches by the time we play both those teams. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think if we're going to lose, it's going to be to Kentucky or Texas A&M. I think we're 10-2.
And it's a 10.5.
Yeah, I'd bet the under. I don't see. I did talk about this yesterday, and I talked about the last 10 national champions and what it takes to become that. I brought up blue chip ratio. I brought the average into it. You have to have an average of a 69.7% blue chip ratio. We have that. Then I brought up quarterback. You have to have an NFL quarterback. Mark, out of the last 10 national championships, only 1 team hasn't had an NFL quarterback, Jake Coker, Alabama. I talked about average offense, average defense. The average offense is there, but you have to be top 10 averagely in both. I think Texas will have a top 10 offense. I think Quinn Ewers is going to be an NFL quarterback. But then there's also that delineation between an NFL quarterback and a first-round NFL quarterback. Sure. And you saw teams like LSU's defense really wasn't that good. They were actually the worst out of the last 10 champions. But guess who they had at quarterback? They had Joe Burrow. So I said, if Texas wants to win a national championship this year, and people can laugh at me, the blueprint is 2019 LSU. Quinn Ewers is going to have a Joe Burrow season next year. He won't have to be that good, but he has to have 90% of those stats for Texas to win a national championship.
Did you just count Cardell Jones as an NFL quarterback?
I believe he got drafted.
He got drafted, I believe, by the Chargers.
Yeah,
he ever threw a pass in the NFL.
I believe he did, but I think so, because my dad is a Chargers fan. I think I remember watching a game with him in it. I may be wrong, but
he sure did. Yeah. He went 6 for 11 for 96 yards and a pick.
I didn't say it had to be a good NFL quarterback. I just said an NFL quarterback.
He threw 11 passes in the NFL for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why, and even Stetson Bennett, I was surprised, but I knew he got drafted. I forgot he got drafted in the 4th round. Like, he wasn't even a 5th, 6th, 7th round. He was a 4th round guy. I was surprised by that.
Did Jake Coker play in the NFL?
I'm going to be straight up honest. I didn't even look into him because I didn't think he did. He may have been undrafted. I think I said drafted when I mentioned it to cover my base because I don't
Yes.
think he got drafted.
No, he did not.
Yeah.
Nor did he play in the NFL.
Yeah.
So that's. Oh, so you said Cardell Jones did. Coker did not.
Stetson Bennett went higher than I thought, 4th round.
Okay, so everybody else is an NFL quarterback except for Jay Coker. Okay.
Yeah, and I even, like I said, the delineation between first round and drafted, if you look at like the 5 upper echelon teams, all of them had a first round quarterback. Deshaun Watson, Tua, Mac Jones, Joe Burrow, and I think J.J. McCarthy is going to be drafted in the first round, so that's 5. I appreciate that, Daryl. I know you're just kissing my butt because I said Kentucky's going to have a good year. But it's yeah, I want to go dive deeper into that too, because I do think there's a formula to where I think if you did enough research, you could predict. I mean, you can predict pretty well overall in college football who the group of teams, but I think you narrow it down even more just based off quarterback, blue chip ratio, and all that other stuff. I'm going to add into, I don't know why I didn't, returning production, because that is a big stat. Like if you look at most teams, there's the only outlier every year is Alabama because of Nick Saban, and he's no longer there. So maybe Kirby Smart moves into that where they can have the 120th returning production at some point and be in the top 4 or top 12 or whatever and compete for a national championship. But every other team last year was a top 25 team in returning production. Alabama was the outlier. They were 120 something, and that was because of Nick Saban.
So if the field does win against Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, who would the team be?
Mark, I really want to say Ole Miss, but the guy standing on the sidelines does not have any big game wins at Ole Miss. I can't do it. Like if he was going to beat or win a big game last year, how do you not beat Alabama at their most vulnerable off a USF where Jalen Milroe has no confidence? By the way, did not play well in that game, and you couldn't beat him. You couldn't beat him, so it's hard for me to believe he can win a national championship. I don't care what the roster looks like, even though I think it's one of the 6 or 7 most talented rosters with the transfer portal. So that's all. I guess Oregon. Oregon would be the 14 for me. Dan Lanning to me, I'm going to get hate for this. I think he's just a better Mario Cristobal. That's what I think he is. I think he's a better recruiting Mario Cristobal because I don't think he's that good of a coach. I really don't. If you were a really good coach, you had to split versus Washington last year. You had just as much, if not more, talent than them, and you lost both those games. And in the championship game, let's be honest here, it wasn't close for the first 3 quarters of that game. You started to make it a game in the 4th quarter.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're not on it with that evaluation. I hate to write guys off.
I'm not writing him off because
40 years old.
He can 100% learn. I've seen Steve Sarkisian learn, and he talks about that, how he uses the offseason to learn. So if his issue, this is the biggest issue with people in general that become successful when they weren't originally, is ego. Like we saw this with Tom Herman. Tom Herman wasn't willing to learn from his mistakes, where Steve Sarkisian has 100% done that at Texas. If Dan Lanning can learn from some of the mistakes he has made, because he has made some, then he'll be a good coach because he has the recruiting part down. Like he's a very good recruiter. Anyone that knows the sport will tell you that. But I think that's what makes Mario Cristobal not a good coach too, is we've seen him do these stupid boneheaded things over and over and over again. So as long as you don't get caught up in that trap, I think Dan Lanning will be a good coach. And he's got so much money behind him at Oregon. I mean, that program has a very upper echelon limit if you can get him there. It's going to be very interesting, especially in the Big Ten. It's funny because I think the 2 best games next year are going to be between a team that's been in that conference for a long time and a new team come in. And I think Georgia and Texas is going to be one of the best games in the year. And I think Ohio State and Oregon, I think that might end up being the best game in college football next year.
Yeah, that could be the semifinals.
Yeah.
So do you have any other teams that you'd like to look at?
Just because I want to, for shits and giggles, Mark, can we click on Florida? Because I got to look at that schedule one more time. I don't even know what the over-under is at.
Incredibly brutal. The last 5 games are not fair.
And they scheduled very hard out of conference games, too. That's the funny, other than Stanford.
Do that to themselves. Let's see. So Florida, they are at 5.5.
Whoa. Wow. Okay.
So here we go. They are at home against Miami. They will probably be, I don't know, maybe that's going to be a pick 'em game. I would think that they would be an underdog against Miami otherwise, who's a 9.5 win total.
But
They
just
beat
give them the
Stanford
benefit of the doubt in the first 4 games and say 3-1. That's like the
3-1.
best
Yeah.
case scenario.
Well, they could be 4-0.
I guess if they went, that would shock me. I guess they could, but I would bet on 3-1 if I saw best case. If that
Well, they're
was,
playing. So they've got one automatic win, although
Yeah.
they gave up 52 points to Samford in one of Dan Mullen's last games. If you remember that 70 to
Yeah.
52 game. Yeah, Mississippi State might be the worst team in the conference. And so they're playing two teams that are on their talent level that appear to be better teams, but in terms of talent comparison, it's almost equal. So they could luck out and be 4-0, and they could luck out and be 5-0 because they get UCF.
yeah, that would be a shock to everyone. That'd be crazy, 5-0, and then let's see. I don't know what their next couple games, 7 games looks like, but if they don't win another game the rest of the year,
What do you think is most likely? 3-2?
most likely, I don't hate 4-1 out of the first 5. Like I would say 3-2, but 4-1's a possibility for sure.
Okay, even if they're 4-1, they go to Tennessee.
They're not winning that game.
They've got Kentucky at home.
I think Kentucky wins that game, but again, toss up. I mean, this is where it just gets it's unfair.
And so what do we have? We've got 4-3.
Yeah, let's give them 4-3
before this final 5. That is one of the toughest stretches of football I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, all those teams, like, even if we're saying at the worst, Florida State may not be like the 15. I don't know why the 15th's there. They may not be the 15th best team in the country next year, but they're going to be a top 25 team. So I think you're going to play 5 top 25 teams in a row. I'm questioning if that's ever happened in college football before.
I can't answer that. I doubt it, just because there's just not, and we're going to see it more likely going forward because these two conferences have become stacked, and there just haven't been conferences stacked like that before to have that possibility.
And here's a question for you, Mark, because I know where I'm going to stand on this. So let's say they go 1-4 and they're 6-6. Do you fire Billy Napier?
If they start 1-4?
No. If they end up 1-4 through the last 5 and end up 6-6.
Not if they're competitive. Like, let's say they're not going to take all those teams down to the wire, but let's say they're most likely going to beat Florida State, I guess.
Yeah, maybe LSU. I'd say Florida State and then LSU.
Yeah. Well, if they're sitting at 5-6 and they go to Florida State and win, and let's say Georgia crushes them by 5 touchdowns and Texas handles them by, they lose to Texas 42-20, but the LSU and the Ole Miss games are really competitive, and then they beat Florida State, then I think he stays.
I actually agree with you. I was going to say the same thing. If they go 6-6 and they're somewhat competitive, like, that's a really hard schedule. I'd give him, like, I think would this be his last year of his contract, or would they have to fire him? If it's his last year of his contract, I would extend him for 2 years, because let's be honest here, just based off of, like, if anyone had to play this schedule, if you gave Texas a schedule, Texas probably goes 8-4, 9-3. Like,
Yeah.
this is a really hard schedule.
Yeah.
So,
And that's why I say the level of competitiveness would be huge to me to evaluate. Okay, let's be realistic. If I'm his boss, I'm looking at, let's be realistic. Almost nobody in the country is getting through this schedule. So how well are they competing? Are they close against top 10 teams in the country?
yeah. No, I agree. The schedule, I don't think there's any team in the country next year that would go undefeated versus the schedule. I just don't.
No.
Especially like if you had a bye breaking up one of these last 5 games, that'd be nice. The SEC schedule makers did not do them any favors with that. Especially, I think you're going to play a rivalry game, and then you know what you get to do? You get to go on the road to Texas. So have fun with that. That doesn't make that's insane to me. Like you could legitimately be playing the number 1 and number 2 ranked teams in the country back-to-back weeks.
Yeah. They could be playing 5 top 10 teams in the country. Most likely they won't, but
yeah,
they
I think
could be.
they're probably going to be playing 4 top 12 teams. I think that's a possibility. I think that's a real possibility.
The worst teams outside of Samford on their schedule is still like an SEC team and a mid to lower Big 12 team.
Yeah. I mean, it's not fair. There's literally, they could go like at worst case scenario, they could be 1-11. Could you see that? Because I could see that. I could see 1-11. Like everything goes bad.
Sure, they could, because if you take it game by game, there's nobody on their schedule outside of Samford that can't beat them, that anyone would be surprised. But it's kind of hard for me to imagine that they would lose to Mississippi State and UCF and Kentucky. But I guess they certainly could.
Yeah. So I guess fair for me would probably be a worst case scenario would be 2-10. I think that's a possibility. What do you think the high end is here? I think it's 7 wins. Can they get to 8 wins? I don't see that.
Yeah, the high end is, again, they start 5-0. High end, somewhat realistic. Then they split Tennessee, Kentucky. They're 6-1. And then they play the final 5 and they steal one and go 7 and it could go 7-5.
Yeah. So I mean 2-10 to 7-5. Like to me, and it was 5.5 was the number.
Yeah.
That's, man, I wish it was 6, but I mean it doesn't really matter at that point. But I would probably take the under. I think 5 and 7 is the most realistic here. Like to me,
if they go 7-5 and they're competitive in those 5 games at the end, and even if it's a 1-4 and they are losing by 1 score against some of the best teams in the country, they should be ranked in the top 25.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't care what their record is. Even if
I agree.
Yeah, 7-5, they should be. Yeah.
Especially, you definitely have to start taking, like you always did in the past, but you definitely have to start taking who you play into account even more now because of how stacked the Big Ten and SEC are.
Like we've talked about on here, if you go through the playoff rankings of what they've been in the last 10 years, 10-2 is a guarantee, and 9-3 is most likely out. If they go 8-4 against this schedule, they should get playoff consideration.
I would agree with that. They wouldn't because of how it's set up. I know we've talked about that a little bit, how you have to put a group of 5 team in there, which is stupid. Because if this team, Florida, went 8-4 next year, and whoever Liberty goes third, Florida would beat a 13-0 Liberty team if they went 8-4 versus this schedule by just as much, if not more, than Oregon did in that bowl game.
Yeah.
And we're officially not in the SEC yet, Darrell, so I can't say whether I've enjoyed it or not. I got July 7th or something like that. So then I'll let you know. But it's going to be fun. Baseball is going to be more fun. Football is going to be more fun. I think actually basketball will be easier for us because the Big 12 is the best basketball conference. But it's going to be fun and interesting, and it's especially the first 3 years in, it's going to be really cool because you get to see all these new matchups, new environments and stuff like that. After time, it definitely is going to wear off just like anything else, but it's going to be fun. And my last question to you, Mark, would be right now, because I think the Big 12 isn't going to be the best conference next year, but I think it's going to be the most interesting. Right now, February, 15th, who is in the Big 12 championship game next year?
Utah, Oklahoma State.
Okay. I have a Sunflower Showdown. I got Kansas State and Kansas rematching in the Big 12 championship game. I'm
would be
still
cool.
on that Kansas bandwagon because if Jalen Daniels is healthy, he's special. And
Okay.
they played pretty damn well last year. Honestly, we haven't got a chance to talk about this, so I actually make this last. Why did Jeb Fish leave Arizona for Washington when what he has coming back at Arizona? I really believe if he's back and they kept everyone together on that team, there's a chance they make the college football playoff, especially when he wants to go back to his alma mater, Florida, when that job probably is open this after this upcoming year.
Well, I don't know what the pay difference is, so that's one factor, and I don't know what those numbers are. If he's thinking long term, then he would rather be in one of the two big conferences.
That's fair. But my sense was, I bet his buyout's way higher now at Washington, and that may deter Florida. Be like, we could have got you at Arizona for like a $5 million buyout. Now at Washington, it's at least probably double that.
Yeah.
I don't know what the numbers are, but I would assume it's more. So to me, that wasn't a very long term. Like, I don't know if maybe he's not. Maybe I thought he was always going to be that Florida guy for them. I thought he was next in line if Billy Napier got fired. Maybe he's not, because I feel like those deals are kind of done in secret behind the doors. But maybe that move was, I never really got the call from my alma mater, so I'm going to take Washington and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I got to think that he just sees Washington as a better job, and it is. And I
Yeah.
got to think that they're paying him more money than Arizona is.
Yeah, and it's also crazy at this point that the new coach at Arizona did a pretty damn good job of keeping the roster together.
Yeah,
I'm
he did.
shocked that none of those offensive guys transfer. Now that portal window will open up, but it's really hard for me to. Usually that's for guys that are stuck at second on the depth chart to transfer. It's really hard for me to see Mike Fafita and McMillan transfer. I just don't see that happening. So I still think they're going to be good.
Yeah, he did a nice job of keeping those guys in house. And like you, the spring transfer portal is basically for these guys that see themselves nosediving on the depth chart and want a fresh start somewhere else. Not guys that are projected to where they can go anywhere because they want that jump from the end of the season to be in that next destination for spring practice.
Yeah, but thank you for having me. And also, guys, Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on the Texas channel and the SEC channel. I'm here every week in the off season, and I will be going forward with that schedule as well. And during the season, I'm here after every game. Saturday, we have one Friday game versus Texas A&M, so I'll be here for that as well. So please join me, guys.
Absolutely. If I had a banner, I would put it up there. So again, Wednesday, 7:30 Eastern, everyone, 7:30 Eastern on the Texas channel or the SEC channel. I got to correct myself on that one. The SEC channel or the Texas channel with Matthew at 7:30 Eastern time. Matthew, appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Mark. Thank you.
All right, folks, no more calls in queue. We got the Amazon links. It's in the description section. And the reason you use that is that's your one way of contributing to the Voice of College Football financially without spending a penny. Spend somebody else's money. Amazon, I think they've got a little pocket change to throw around, so you can use the Amazon link, do your Amazon shopping using our link, and help contribute to the channel. Same shopping experience for you. Doesn't cost you a penny. We got the SEC and the Big 12 channels, as Matthew just pointed out. We've got a lot of good things in store here. We're going to be, I continue to pump out the content, throw the videos at you, try to hit on something that you guys will enjoy as we continue through our TV rating series. We're going to provide our coaches rankings here soon. I've got them complete. I just have to produce the video. So our coaches rankings are coming soon, and we're going to conclude the TV rating series as well. And the Big Ten show, as you see in the banner, the Big Ten live show with your calls and with a lot of great guests, Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, Friday at 7 Eastern, right here on the main channel, the Big Ten live show. Catch up with the Clemson show. It's going on right now with Jordan and with Tiger Paw Craven over on the Clemson channel, the All-In show with those two talking Clemson football. And also starting at 8 o'clock was the Big 12 show over on the Big 12 channel with Joey Foster. Right here at the Voice of College Football. And again, we are about a month away from spring practice and about a month away from doing our State of the Voice of College Football. All right. Thank you so much for all that you do. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Never take it for granted. And we will see you soon.